Good afternoon everyone. Another biology video from me this time. Now, in this video I'm going to have a quick look at some ecological terms. I will then have a quick look at food chains, food webs, pyramids of number, pyramids of biomass. But the majority of the time we'll be looking at the important topic of energy flow through ecosystems. And this comes with a health warning, milia, and probably a few others. There's loads of lovely maths involved. Right, let's have a quick reminder of where you should be up to, because you've had, of course, a half-term week off. I haven't set you any work for a while. Now, we're working through topic 1.5. The point you should have got to on the note sheet was to the end of that bit on eutrophication. Now the next part of the note sheet starts covering sampling techniques, but I'm not going to cover that here and now. This is better covered through practical work, so we'll see about covering this at a later point. What we are going to jump onto is this bit here from the definitions onwards on the note sheet. Now, on the question sheet, you should also have completed sections A and C by now, but not B, for the same reason I mentioned earlier. It's to do with sampling techniques. On top of that, you should definitely by now have finished all those past papers I set you as revision work, and ideally have completed one component 1 and one component 2 paper under exam conditions. Hopefully you found all that past paper practice very useful. Anyway, on with topic 1.5. Right, now your first task, as mentioned on the email, is to complete this sheet 1.5.7a. Now, actually, I don't want you to do every term like that. It's basically just a matching exercise where at the moment the terms and the definitions are not correctly matched up. Rather than just do messy lines all over the place, probably better to just number these 1, 2, 3, etc., and then just write 1s, 2s and 3s in the right place here. So just put these in order, 1, 2, 3, etc., and then find the definition for community and write a 1 next to that and so on. However, at this stage I don't want you to do these ones from succession onwards. Save those for next week. So up to and including biomass, which means you won't need to use every definition. To help you with that, were we in class, we'd have just used a textbook, but as you know, I've sent you a link to a website anyway, which will help you with it, the SCool webpage. Got it up here actually. You can use those definitions there, or use that webpage to help you match them up, and the answers are on Moodle for this sheet as well. And once you've matched them up and checked your answers, copy the relevant definitions then onto the note sheet as shown here. Right, just a further word of explanation about those definitions, just to clarify their meaning in your mind. Now here we've got a diagram of a woodland ecosystem. The entire thing would be the ecosystem. It would include all the living things, plants and animals, but not only that, the abiotic components as well, the air, the soil, any sources of water within it. All together, the living organisms and the abiotic components make up the ecosystem. Now within the ecosystem, you've got the community, which basically just means all the living organisms, and then you've got the abiotic components as well. Now, for each of the different species of living organisms, there are populations. For example, all the foxes in this ecosystem will be a fox population, and you'll have a wood mouse population, a caterpillar population, because a population is a group of organisms of the same species living in the same place. A community is all the living organisms found in an ecosystem. This can maybe be summed up with a little Venn diagram showing that like this. An ecosystem consists of community plus abiotic components. Abiotic just means non-living components. And the community is itself made up of all of the different populations. Top of that, a couple of other terms. The habitat, the place where something lives. Sometimes you might just say the woodland is its habitat for some larger creatures. For some smaller ones, more specialised ones, you would put specific places. Some, in many invertebrates, their habitat is the leaf litter at the bottom of the woodland. For others, you might be more specific and say for many caterpillars, it's the leaves on the trees that are their habitat, etc. You've also got the term niche, often called ecological niche, which just says an organism's role in the ecosystem. In other words, almost like an organism's job in the ecosystem. Put that in context. For example, the role of the shrew is to eat earthworms but provide food for the owl. The role of the fungi is to break down the dead leaf matter and other decaying matter and recycling the nutrients. The role of the earthworms is similar to eat sort of dead leaf matter, recycling the nutrients for those as well. So it's almost like the role they play in helping to make sure the ecosystem continues on a well-balanced basis. You might think it's strange to say a shrew's role is to eat the earthworms. Well, you don't want too many earthworms in one place. You don't want the population exploding. That's no good. But also their role is to then provide full food for the higher predators as well. The environment is basically the biotic and abiotic conditions which surround and affect an organism. These can be abiotic conditions like temperature, amount of water, amount of light, but can also be biotic components like competition, predation, disease, etc. Right, that's enough on the definitions from me. At this point, as mentioned on the email, I need you to pause the video in a few seconds anyway and ensure that you complete, if you've not already done so, that definitions table on the notes sheet. Then go to the question sheet and complete 7 and 8 on there just to reinforce your understanding of those definitions. Come back to this video when you've completed all of that, please. Right, very brief mention of food chains, food webs and pyramids. You'll have all be familiar with this from GCSE anyway. There are some examples of simple food chains. Each organism occupies what's often called a trophic level, a producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer. Arrows are always found within food chains. You might just be asked, what does an arrow represent? And for your answer, don't write it represents what eats what. That's not enough at A level. You have to write for your answer, the arrows represent the direction of energy flow, because energy moves from the corn to the rat. The rat gets its energy by eating the corn and so on. And as you can see here, you've got the different terms again: producer, primary, secondary, tertiary. Oh, it says tertiary consumer again with that one. Really, it should be quaternary consumer, the last one. Okay, right. Now, food chains, of course, don't show all the feeding relationships in an ecosystem. That's what a food web does, such as this. Again, I'm sure you're familiar with these, and you could be asked to construct food chains from food webs. One would be shrub, rabbit, mountain lion, simple 3-link one, but you can get longer ones: shrub, grasshopper, insect-eating bird, hawk, for example. These show more completely the feeding relationships because they, unlike food chains, which suggest that, all organisms eat only one other organism, that rarely happens, of course, in real life. Does sometimes, by the way, but not very commonly. Right, pyramids of number. Sometimes they are shaped like that. Many grasses can feed still quite a lot of grasshoppers, feeding fewer mice and even fewer snakes, but pyramids of number actually aren't always pyramid shaped. When is a pyramid not a pyramid? No, it's not a joke. It's a biology question. When it's a pyramid of number, at least sometimes, you can sometimes get them shaped like that, still called a pyramid of number, even if it's not a pyramid, or even like this at times. We can alternatively show it as a pyramid of biomass, and these are always shaped like a genuine pyramid. The biomass basically just means, by the way, the dry mass of living organisms. You just don't include the water. There's a dry mass of each living organisms at each trophic level in this case. These are always pyramid shaped. You always have a larger mass of plants feeding a smaller mass of primary consumers, even smaller mass of secondary, and so on. Third type of pyramid you even see sometimes is a pyramid of energy. It just shows the amount of energy contained at each trophic level. Of course, the amount of energy in joules, in old-fashioned units would have been calories, is directly proportional to the amount of biomass. The greater the mass of a living organism, the greater amount of energy it would contain. And these are always pyramid shaped as well. Right, at this point, pause my video again and complete sheet 1.5.8. You can mark it for yourselves as well. Come back to me only when you've completed that, please. Right, let's move on again at this point. Going back to the note sheet, the source of energy for ecosystems is of course just the sun. For virtually all ecosystems, there are a few, such as those Movile caves I showed you a video on in Romania, for which chemosynthesis is the source, but just put the sun here anyway. You then got two definitions. They're just given to you on the sheet. Just want a quick word about them. Gross primary productivity, the rate at which plants convert light energy to chemical energy, and net, the rate at which they convert light energy into biomass that could be passed on. Why is there a difference, or what exactly do they mean? Let's illustrate them. Now, as this pyramid of energy that I showed you earlier shows, plants are actually remarkably inefficient at converting light energy into chemical energy. Percentage efficiency shown there, 10,000 out of 1 million. Quickly work it out, and shame on you if you're reaching for a calculator. Pause for a second and work it out. There's of course just 1%. Sounds incredibly low, doesn't it? Only 1% of the sunlight energy hitting plants is converted actually into chemical energy within the plant. That would be called their gross primary productivity. But plants also have a net primary productivity. It can of course be related to pay slips, this whole thing. Here's a sample pay slip, not mine by the way. I certainly don't get paid that much by the college. This would be called the gross pay, 3,500. Imagine getting that every month. You'd be rubbing your hands together thinking I'm quids in. Brilliant, let's make plans for 3,500. But wait a minute, that's not what you get in your account, of course. There's all sorts of deductions. After deductions, your net pay, 2,500. So the net is always lower than the gross in pay. Same applies in productivity. Of those 10,000 joules that plants manage to convert into chemical energy, basically in the form of glucose, it's not all available to be eaten by the herbivores, because plants use up some of that energy in their own respiration. It's not all converted into biomass in the plant. Once the plants have made the glucose, it can undergo two fates. One, it can be used for their own respiration, or two, it can be used to make new biomass. In other words, new plant material help the plant to grow. In other words, net primary productivity is the gross primary productivity minus what the plants use in respiration. Worth dwelling for a minute actually back on this point here. I said earlier, only 1% productivity for plants there. And that's not always as high as that even. That's actually a pretty productive plant that has a 1% productivity. What happens to the other 99% of the solar energy hitting the plants? How come it's not converted into chemical energy? Well, several reasons. Shown here really. Some of the light that hits the plants is just reflected off the leaf surface anyway. Secondly, quite a bit of it is transmitted otherwise it just passes right through the leaf. Why would this happen? Well, it can only be absorbed if it hits chloroplasts, and not all light is going to hit chloroplasts. Some of it would be reflected off the cell walls, but then some of it is also the incorrect wavelength. What on earth does that mean? Well, as you know, there's a number of basic colours of light. White light or sunlight is actually a mixture of various different colours. Now, the chloroplasts within the plant can basically only, of the primary colours, of which white light is basically a mixture of blue, green and red, the primary colours of light. Chloroplasts can absorb blue light very well. They can absorb red light almost as well. Their ability to absorb green light is very low. Why can't they absorb hardly any green light? Well, because they reflect green light from the chloroplasts, of course. That's why plants appear green. They reflect green light. White light hits them, the red and the blue are absorbed, the green light is reflected. That's why they appear green to our eyes. And this is different. This is the wrong wavelength, is the green light. It's different to what we mentioned earlier about reflect, because the reflected mentioned earlier really meant reflected from the cell walls. Now, the note sheet mentions using page 74 to complete this next section, but as you don't have access to the books, just use this diagram instead. Those are the three main reasons: reflection, incorrect wavelength and transmission. Just do a sketch of that. Don't worry about all these bits in black when you sketch the diagram, and I'll attach this document to the email. Right, but there may only be a 1% efficiency at that level of the food chain, from sunlight to plants. But it's not as though even all the plants, energy in the plants, gets passed on to these snails or the other primary consumers. Only 10% of the energy there gets passed on. So there's another big load of wasted energy. That's for completely different reasons. I mean, it's nothing to do with light being transmitted, reflected. Snails don't carry out photosynthesis. Why is only 1/10 of the energy available in plants passed on? Well, one big reason to mention straight away is that not all the plants get eaten. This is the total amount of energy present in all the plants in that ecosystem, but not every bit of every plant is going to be eaten. Otherwise, the ecosystem will soon die out completely, of course. So not all the plants get eaten, but even of the plants, or not all parts of the plants get eaten, even the parts that do get eaten don't always get efficiently converted into biomass. Now, if we just say, let's say 4,000 of that 10,000 joules of plant matter gets eaten, then still, what happens to the other 3,000 that doesn't end up as snail biomass? Well, plants are difficult to digest. They have cellulose cell walls. You have to put in a lot of energy to digest them. You actually use some energy simply digesting the plant matter. Also, you're not able to digest it as thoroughly as animal matter anyway. Not even herbivores that are specialised can thoroughly digest plant matter. They produce a large amount of waste, largely as feces. So that's another source of loss of energy. Even if they consume 4,000, they may only actually assimilate, what's called assimilating, actually gain, which means it sort of gets converted into chemical energy available for the snail. But then, of course, quite a lot of the chemical energy it does get is lost as respiration. So not all of the energy it does get is available to be passed on. This can be summed up in this diagram, really, of the plant matter consumed. Some of it is lost through urine and feces, sometimes called excretion. Strictly as urine, and feces is egestion. You've also got respiration, plus you've got the fact I mentioned earlier that not all parts of the plant are eaten. Same point on the note sheet. You can't use page 75, so draw the diagram I've just shown you of the cow. This one. but add an extra point about not all parts of the plants are eaten. Right, this can all be summed up nicely in this little diagram I've got here. Light energy, only 1% of that is absorbed. Of the light that is sort of absorbed and converted into chemical energy, some of that is lost as heat through respiration. The rest of it is available to be passed on to the rabbits of what they consume. They lose quite a bit of it in feces, but also lose some as, when I say heat, basically it's through respiration. And that is why the pyramid of energy is indeed pyramid shape. There's a lot of loss of energy between each level. Every time you go up the consumer part, the reasons for the loss of energy here are completely different. We've mentioned those in the plants, but all the way up here it's always not all parts of the plant or not all animals are eaten. Feces and respiration largely the reasons why energy is lost at each stage. And for that reason, there are always only a limited number of trophic levels in any food chain. The maximum that you can ever get is 6. Most food chains wouldn't even go beyond 5, to be honest, because by the time you get up here, there's basically just virtually no energy left to pass on. Nothing could be trying to consume these apex predators, which might be things like lions, tigers, birds of prey, because there's just not enough of them to provide much energy. You might think, oh, well, if you ate a lion, that's quite a bit of energy. Yeah, it would be. But there's just not enough lions about to provide you with a sustainable source of food. If you're only getting 10% of that figure, it's just not enough energy left to pass on beyond this point. Right, I've covered the basics of energy flow in ecosystems. You should have completed the note sheet up to that point. I still need to cover the more mathematical aspects of it actually, but it strikes me this video is already quite long at 22 minutes and it's probably enough work to keep you going for a few days at least. So I'm going to stop this video in a second and then make a second video on the mathematical aspects of this. So you've got a stay of execution, you maths haters. One last thing to do though, and that is this sheet I was showing you just now, sheet 1.5.9. Again, the mark scheme for this is actually on the mark scheme that I sent you a week or two ago, on the sort of mark scheme for topic 1.5 question sheet plus associated tasks. So get 1.5.9 done as well, and then that will do for the time being. Okay, speak to you again in a day or two. Hope everyone's well. Bye now.